I just want to quickly dus introduce the book by Sheldon Richmonds. It got published last year in October. Sheldon is a student of Joseph Agassi, and I'm just going to show you the cover of the book in a minute. But the whole purpose of the book is to go back to the method of asking questions. And he also wrote a book as if it was a conversation. So he didn't put an index in it, and he didn't put a bibliography in it, because he really wants us to just read the entire book and jump like in the middle of the book. I mean, I do that. I open the middle of a book, but then you literally need to start reading, because otherwise you can't get a sense of what it is. Now I'll show you some of this. I just show you some slides. Let me just I prepared some slides to get you a sense of the book, because what I'm thinking about is Sheldon was busy writing. So he wrote that because he believed there was some merit that would come out of reading this book. And so I wanna like recognize all the hours that he spent on writing, in the hope that we would read it. And actually,
yes, please.
Yeah, so I'll just start with this as a reference point, since he was a student of Joseph Agassi. And by the way, the book is available for free for people who want, but it can also be found on the internet. Now, I hear a voice in the background. I think maybe that is Matthias, or I'm just going to, or maybe, anyway, it's gone. So what he wants to do in this book is connect the dots. So if you wonder, that is not some sort of artificial intelligence creature, but that is him connecting a couple of dots. And it's kind of interesting that there is some symmetry somewhere. But the title of the book is Reclaiming Our Humanity, Restoring. And that's something that's interesting. I always think it's about reclaiming, but actually it's really about restoring our humanity. So, okay. So then, sorry, it was one up. So he organizes his question asking, reintroducing the art of questions, in 6 essays. And they're all talking, I mean, for people who know European philosophy, it's all about being in the world. So you either are continuously talking, observing, doing, making, thinking, or being. And if any of you want to interrupt with the question, please interrupt. So, but what is really trying to, actually, what I should say, what is really important in chapter number 1, he makes a reference to Lin Tang, and Lin Tang is a person who was educated in Taiwan and then spent time in the United States, then went back to mainland China, and he wrote kind of a commentary in a pleasant, playful voice about Socrates and Plato. And so he said, well, what those Greeks are doing, they're developing the philosophy of I'm entirely right, and since I'm entirely right, therefore those who disagree with me must be entirely wrong. And so that's a very interesting segue, I thought, because this Popper, as I understood him, is the one who does the opposite, who says, I may be wrong, you may be right, and by an effort we get nearer to the truth. So there already I learned something from Sheldon, like if we have conversations with people, how do they respond to when you say, I may be wrong, you may be right, and together we get we get somewhere in a better place, as opposed to people who just say, I'm entirely right. And actually that's justified through belief philosophy, as we learned from Bartley, supposedly. But now here, this is the summary of the book, basically. It's like really about now, how really should we ask questions, because he's practicing over 6 essays. And as I understood it, he really tries to be dus stay away from the I entirely right. So he asks us, he gives us two methods of asking questions. And so one is where you have only two choices, and that is like we either say yes or no, or we either agree or disagree, and that's so the questions force an answer. And then the other one is actually that you're also allowed to come up with the two additional answers of like saying, yeah, it depends. Dus that you think the question is not clear enough, or that you just really think that the question is irrelevant. And so, so I in closing, maybe I wanted some. Actually, I had a plan that with Elise that we were going to ask you whether you had any question that was currently on your mind. I mean, now we can have this like over a glass of wine question, or coffee shop questions of like about something totally theoretical that we know there is no immediate answer. But whether any of you have like a problem, instead of a question, it's really a problem that you would like to solve over the next 2-3 years, and how can we help you solve your problem, or what sort of resources? And that can be any sort of problem. So that is what we would like to leave you with. If you could share. Sadia is back, and I'm just putting the in the room. Yeah. So Tembe, may I begin with you, because you post something very, very you pose the big picture problem. So is there a way that we may be able to slice it into a smaller problem that we can be of assistance?
To start with, on my screen, I don't have the option to raise a hand. That's why I keep on raising it physically. It's kind of tricky for me, but I'll try and package it better. I am in the process of registering an organization, the name of which is Peace Engineering. I had some challenges, I think, growing up, which I think I've been able to address most through reading. Around 2006, a lecturer at university gave me a book called Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman. That book changed the person that I was in a very big way. And I think a few years after that, I read Social Intelligence by the same author. I have since gone through a lot in my personal life, a lot of grief and all, which I came out of through reading. Now, with some recent developments that happened in my life, I came to understand something, that there is a greater need to share certain information with people, which could help them either cope better with their lives, reduce stress, and perhaps assist them in not scoring own goals. So I had a question as early as last year to say, when a war is planned or when there's a war somewhere, I think scientists are in the forefront, because I think warlords generally ask them what type of weapons we can use to defeat our enemies and to cause more damage. What if you could put engineers in a room and say to them, for a certain amount of money or certain resources, I'm going to ask you to design the opposite of a weapon, which may not practically exist, but I'm hoping to sort of build the framework upon which trials of such can be made. And should it be that peace cannot be engineered in my lifetime, I hope to at least contribute towards the investigation of that possibility. So another thing that I came to realize, I started questioning the meaning of my names and what they mean. So my name Temba is in a language called Xhosa. It's in South Africa, and Muiti is a surname. It's in Tswana. So the name Temba means hope, and the surname Muiti means knowledge. That's another reason why I like Popper, you know. So I then thought, what if my names mean that I have to provide hope or give hope through knowledge? And unfortunately, that means I have to read a lot. You know, when you are someone who has to be referred to as someone who knows, but you don't know much because you don't read. So I read a lot. Like I read a new book at least every 2 months or 3 months. So my biggest challenge for the next coming years is to develop programs of sharing information that already exists and packaging it in ways that will make sense to the ordinary guy, or even make better sense to the intellect who doesn't maybe know how to formulate certain things in a way that makes sense for them to even get the correct answers or relevant answers, if I can put it that way.
So, Temba, could you put contact information in the chat room? You probably gave it already, but then we have it immediately that we can connect it with the project you just gave us. Is that possible to give you as an email address or a phone number to text you or do some other
I'm gonna do just that.
Say that again, sorry. Yeah.
I will supply the information. I think what I'm trying to do is a very ambitious project, and it would be quite helpful to get ideas, because I don't necessarily have something to look at to reference from.
Yeah, because it's precisely, I guess, what this Google group is created for, because we did do some brainstorming already and on another chapter of brainstorming, and there's so many little things that I think each one of us can do that by themselves are not important, but when we do them all together, then it really makes a difference. So we could really help you by just giving feedback. And I mean, I don't know, there's so many different ways, but so the first thing is we need an email address in that chat room before the connection gets lost, because I do remember you, but I cannot immediately say that I know where your contact information is. And I think that's anyway. Is there any other feedback to what Temba just told us? Luc or Syed? Who else? Mini Technique and Marilyn. I'm just calling names. Sadia.
Yes, what is it? Sorry, Margaret.
Well, I was just, we're now starting the closing hour, and Elise was going to be with us, but she actually was doing literally an all-nighter. It's now close to, yeah, so she started at 6 p.m. in the evening, and now it's 5 a.m. in Australia. So I'm taking over from her. That we did this discussion last time about skill sharing and the setting up of that Google group, and things are maybe going a little slowly, but they're still going. And just the point was to help each other with our Popper related projects. And Temba just taught something that peace engineering, to make people think differently about war. And I'm just soliciting feedback. And so I thought maybe you had something to offer. And Sayed, and there is Harry, go ahead.
It's a question. I'm sorry, I've got a bad connection, but the peace engineering, as I understood it, you were talking about engineers coming up with what I think of as traditional physical engineering solutions, rather than it's a societal engineering. So are you hoping that they can, instead of helping to make better physical weapons, that they can find some way of making physical objects that will make peace more likely? Or are you thinking more widely in terms of social engineering as well? That's my question.
I think I've not really looked into the details of what social engineering is, but what I maybe some have little experience on is that things that are built by engineers tend to work, and they tend to work for a very long time, so I think I'm more interested in the processes of engineering, thinking of peace from a perspective of engineering, not necessarily to build physical things, although when you have the manpower in future and you look at a certain community that is struggling, and you could get certain individuals together who could engineer a solution, either a bridge or a fence or something like that, but mainly to get engineers into the idea of contributing towards peace as opposed to mainly building weapons for war. I think I'm thinking along those lines.
Thank you.
Yes, when I heard you say peace engineering, I was thinking of Karl Popper's peace meal engineering. And then, of course, there's also the question, like, who came first, the scientists or the engineers? And are there actually real scientists? Is maybe in reality the engineers who do all the progress, and the scientists just talk about it afterwards. But either way, what you say resonates with me in terms of, like, we need more interesting stories or different ways of talking. And I think, and I hope, Matthias, you will reveal yourself if you're there, and Sayed perhaps also, that I have nephews and nieces, and I think they need different stories. I mean, or they need some story that is, that's a fun story. I mean, to continue living instead of having to deal with the war in the Ukraine, who is at some level is 100% absurd that we still have that war going on. And so a way, and I think that's what you're trying to do, Temba, to come up with a way of talking that we solve problems instead of just recycling the same old way of thinking. Is that you're trying to come up with a different lexicon to solve problems instead of
I think
instead of pointing fingers and saying you are the problem. Yeah. Go ahead.
Let me try and say it this way. In engineering, when you design something, either a bridge or a door hinge, let's talk about a door hinge. You list certain parameters, the weight of the door, and what's the angle at which it must swing open. Basically, what I'm thinking is the processes that are used in engineering solutions, if they could be applied to problems of peace or doing away with stress or minimizing suffering, if we could use the same processes or methods, hopefully the solutions would be more long-lasting and would be more easier to apply. I think anybody can build a chair. Well, many people, if you give them wood and tools, they could maybe make a chair. But if you say that there's a certain individual that is suffering, how can we help them? Usually the solutions are not very direct. Okay, let me give you an example. If we design stress or define stress in engineering terms, I think stress is force over area. If stress is force over area, and the area that we talk about could be the area of the mind, we could reduce the stress by adding new information, which would increase the surface area of the mind, and that would reduce stress. Now, you can give people information that is maybe helpful to their situations. So that, I think, would help increase the surface area of their minds. So that's inversely proportional to the stress. Now, to also reduce stress, usually people don't have, if stress is equally proportional to the force and inversely proportional to the area, and we think that there's a force acting on a person, we could then say, usually people don't have a way of reducing the forces that are acting on them. But should we be able to call friends or people that you know, some contacts, usually external people can reduce the force. So that I'm just simply using an equation from engineering, which is stress equals force over area. I think it applies for physical things. So I'm trying to imagine that applicable to human situations. So usually if you have friends, they can do something about the forces that are acting on you, whether they be, let's just say you need a lawyer or you need medical advice. If you could get such advice, your stress levels can go down. So basically, if you could think of reducing people's stresses from such an equation, I think intrapersonal peace would have its own equation. Peace between two people would have a more complex equation. Peace between three people would make it even more complex. But using engineering framework to come up with these ideas and lay them out in that way could be far more effective than solutions that we've seen, I think, in the past. I think politically speaking, ideas come and go, but nothing builds on another one. So
Harry?
My first reaction was to try and play devil's advocate in the hope that you could clarify things for me. But can I say that what I'm hearing you describe is what I would describe as a sort of metaphorical extension from one area of engineering into something that's in another silo, in this case, human mental health. Is that fair, that you're making it just extending, but it's a metaphorical thing. They're not the same thing in reality. So it's not the actual engineering technology that would be used by an engineer who's looking at stresses and strains in bridge structures and taking those ideas and trying to, it's definitely purely metaphorical, what you've described. I'm glad you made that clear, because I was really struggling to see how you could use techniques in physics. And traditionally, I worked in the Department of Engineering, not doing computing work. And I tried to think what those engineers, what they could do. And one thing I would say is that my experience, there were a few people who were very interested in solving big problems, like how to get good quality, potable drinking water all over the world, but the money that's made available for this sort of thing is next to zero. And they were trying to squeeze it in sort of under the door of the rest of their funding, and as a sideline almost, because there wasn't a lot of demand for doing that. And yet there was huge demand. So one of my colleagues and I had difficulty trying to help them with their work at all, because it was to work on producing more efficient military helicopters. That's where the money was in engineering departments. So in terms of actual hardware and traditional engineering techniques, I can tell you that there's a huge amount of intellectual ability out there, But and two problems arise that I'm aware of, having seen young engineers come in and doing postgraduate work. First of all, they need something that is really attractive. So a lot of people going into biomedical engineering when I left this field a decade or so ago, and partly because that's where industry was going, and they could hope get employed in that direction, and partly because it was challenging. And one saw at the end of the Second World War people moving away from doing physics, and indeed the work in molecular biology is partly attributed to the work of the book by Schrödinger, which was, he's a physicist, and so was read by physicists who didn't want to be making atom bombs, okay, after the Second World War. So they had a new sort of goal, a positive goal for humanity to aim for, which was not being physicists. That's the point. It was using the minds that they had as physicists, the critical faculties, and the ability to understand wider issues that are scientific. That's what took them into molecular biology. But it wasn't being better nuclear physicists to bring about peace. Or few did. There was a whole Atoms for Peace, which was largely a PR exercise at the end of the Second World War. So, and that would have been good if all they'd done was move into nuclear power, better at least than making bombs, in my opinion. But that in reality, that it was used in Britain certainly as a cover for getting the nuclear material to make more bombs. You know, so, and when people realized that, they became even more disenchanted. So I think that's why I asked, was it a social engineering, the wider social context that you were concerned with? Because that I can understand, both the need and the possibility of working in that way. How one does it, I don't know. There are departments of peace studies, for example, in Bradford in England, and I'm sure in other universities all over the world, not many, because you're more likely to get funded for some sort of war college in pretty much any country in the world than you are for a Department of Peace Studies. Anyway, so sorry, I'm maybe being too negative, but I'm hoping to sharpen up so it's the sort of my understanding when you respond to the sort of things that I feel I could engage with, and perhaps other people also. That's all I should be saying. Thank you.
Demba, did you want to give a response before I go to Sadia?
I think your response, Harry, is quite closer to where I'm trying to get. And I appreciate your feedback on that, because I also don't really understand what I'm doing. I just feel a burning desire to add to the problem solving. I think especially the things that I'm exposed to in South Africa, I see a lot of people, even if they're not lucky, they just score a lot of own goals. And if you could give them something like Aristotle's challenge, you know, anyone can be angry, that's easy. But to be angry with the right person at the right time, you tell someone something just like that, it makes their life very easy immediately. So sometimes, even if you're not lucky, but if you could minimize own goals alone, your life could be amazingly different. So I think, Harry, you were quite spot on in helping me shape that idea better. And thank you for that.
Sadia?
Yeah, first of all, I apologize because I came in much later, so maybe what I'm about to say, I haven't heard. From what I've heard, here are some comments on that, because I feel like from what you're describing, there's an underlying assumption that somehow we could get peace if we could fulfill certain human needs, or I mean, I see that there is a focus on suffering, and then if we could, there are some basic needs of humans, if we could satisfy, and maybe we could have a peaceful society. But the way I look at humans, to me, how humans are different from other animals, is that I think that at any level you get to, you'll never be satisfied. And that's what makes us human. Like, no matter where you get, we're always saying, what's next? If our basic needs are satisfied, like if you're not hungry, dying of hunger, then there'll always be the next level. Oh, now suddenly medical technology is able to maybe give us longer lives, or maybe reverse aging. But because the limited resources, at any time there'll be something for which there'll be haves and have-nots. And that's just the way things are. So I think there will always be that issue that at any time, wherever we are, because the way I look at it, for example, technology such as smartphones, At one time, it was more of a luxury, but now it's become more of a necessity. If you live in the Western world, not having a smartphone or smart technology puts you at a disadvantage. So it's become one of those basic needs. So I'm not sure how we could tackle that through what you're talking about. And as a matter of fact, I think that I see places like, when we see weapons and stuff, we look upon it as something really negative. But my question is, what is the alternative? Because we can't tell people to be satisfied with certain ideas and to stop there. If we could, then yes. But we want more. We want more, and more. And I don't see anything negative about that. I see that this is the only way humanity could actually not go extinct like the other animals, on this planet. We've seen there have been mass extinctions. If there's one creature on this planet that could survive, it's probably humans. But at the same time, we're always in that pushing. There are always these problems that could fire back and we could end up dying. There's always that danger, but we have to keep going. Otherwise, there's no way we're going to ever survive. So it's not just survival. I think there's more to us than survival. We just want to. We were explorers. We're creators. We don't know any boundaries. I'll stop at that point.
Margarita,
yes. Yeah, Temba reply and then Hari.
Sadia, I would like to suggest that you read a book called The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. I'm not sure if you've heard of the book or have read it already, but I think apart from the part that when you get to a certain level, you want something more, a lot of us, I believe, are in a better place in that we are struggling with things that move humanity forward. Below us, there are people who are struggling with things that we have solutions to, or at least know how to get around. And if we could somehow find ways of sharing such information so as to make those people's lives less of a suffering, I'm not saying we can ever be satisfied, but as we speak, you have people who sleep on the streets. And it could just be that they don't understand how to get along with other people. Those people could be taught social skills. Maybe they have a bad temper. If you could help such a person get along with others, they are likely to be accommodated in a home. So it's not so much about, yes, there'll be another need if you solve this one. I think speaking like a Popperian, I think you are trying to say that a solution to a problem is also a problem. But again, if you look at it like I'm saying, there are people who are on drugs and new information is coming up about what addiction actually is. I think there's a physician called Dr. Gabor Mate who shares a very different story of addiction. I think Dr. Bruce Perry as well. If you could get information which has already been found or exists to people who don't already know it, at least get them out of the ditch that they're in, so that maybe when we are struggling for better phones or better cars, they could at least be also looking for better cars and not trying to get out of a ditch, because they're ready to get them out of there already exist. This is the book
Can I
I'm
just
reading.
ask you one thing on that? Just on that comment. Aren't we already doing that? Because here's the thing, like there's some people, when I ask that question, that aren't we already, there'll be, there will always be this comment like, next time we go into space or we're going to send something, oh, but there are people dying. Like there are literally people who will say that we should not be investing into anything till every person on this planet is fed or we are somehow addressing their needs. But I don't think that's actually even possible. So it's kind of hard to strike like what's the right place. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, but I mean, I feel like we are doing, but the question comes down to how much are you expecting that should be done versus maybe in other endeavors, is really the question that it comes down to. It's a hard question.
I think my view is that the people in this group, especially with everything they know, should have more weight, or they should be viewed more as more important than celebrities, because I think the people in this group have information that can make other people's lives better. If you can teach a person thinking skills, well, it starts with vocabulary. The amount of self-talk that happens, if it was only positive, people's lives could be a little bit easier. So if I could make you, Sadia, a celebrity and get people listening to what you know, you could help them at least not find themselves at the lower ranking of society in terms of not being able to get along, even with themselves. So I wanted to show you a picture of the book that I'm reading now. I don't know if you've heard of it.
No, I haven't.
It's about sharing simple ways of getting people to do certain things. So moving from threatening people with punishment, how can you nudge them into behaving in ways that are beneficial? So I read books. I read a bit of philosophy. I think last year I read a book called Anger and Forgiveness by Martha Nussbaum. That book for me exposed pockets of anger within myself that I did not know existed, and I started addressing them. So all I'm saying is, it doesn't mean that we are ever going to get to a point where everybody's happy, but can we at least minimize extreme suffering through information which already exists, packaged in ways that are easy to consume by the ordinary guy in the street? Then maybe we can call ourselves clever. Because right now, if we're a group of people who are above average thinkers, and I think in my community, I struggle to find people who can make me think like maybe, I don't know. I struggle to find people who can tickle my mind and make me excited about thinking, So how do you even teach people how to have intellectual conversations? Now, I think a book I read recently by Dr. Perry, I think it's What Happened to You, I think he's with Oprah authoring the book. Now, the story that is being shared in that book is that before you can teach somebody something, you must check if they are well regulated, emotionally regulated. Now, you still struggle with people who are going through the West and you are trying to teach them ideas about Karl Popper. This person's priority is feeling better because they feel worse. They've been feeling bad the whole month about something that happened to them. So maybe even before we teach intellectual information, we must first learn to help people to feel better so that the thinking part of their brains is accessible to good information. Then we can start trying to share ideas. So sometimes it's not even just about having good ideas, but the person whom you are talking to, do they maybe need to eat before they talk to you? Maybe you are coming to have a meeting with me and I'm very, very hungry and you want to tell me something critical that can change my life, but I'm so hungry that I can't even hear you. Would it be possible maybe that you could think of that before you even talk to me? And if you do have a slice of bread, give me that to eat before you tell me about Karl Popper. Then maybe I can hear you. But after I hear you and you tell me about Karl Popper and I had something to eat, I start applying the theory of Karl Popper. I stop scoring on goals by believing in dogma and a lot of other things. I'm not sure if we get in somewhere in helping you understand where I'm coming from.
Actually, I sort of understand. If you don't mind me, I don't know if anybody else had a hand up, or can I comment to that, Margareta?
We have still another 25 minutes, so please do comment. Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that I actually taught at a high school for a while, which I pretty much had mostly kids from low socioeconomics, and majority of them were from African American communities. And one of the things that I came across, because I saw a lot of behavioral issues, and we identified the reasons, because those kids were coming from broken homes, low socioeconomic, and they weren't even ready to be educated. They needed to be saved first. And when they felt like somebody was able to save them, that's when they put their trust in those people. But there was a long journey ahead. But another big thing that came about was that those kids, particularly the boys, did not have male role models. And I think that I've really thought about this issue, that how do we bring some of these communities that have suffered because of, the past history and so forth, how do we even bring them to a point where the kids in that community can see a bigger future, a bigger picture, because right now they don't even have the vision. And when they see television, the sort of role models, they want to look upon people who look like them, and that is the truth. They majority of the people, whether it's whichever community it is, somehow people gravitate to people who look like them. They want, like, women will sometimes gravitate towards role models who are other women. It seems to be the case for whatever psychological reason. So no, I agree with you that I think that there is a great need for inspirational role models, but who are also working models, like not just somebody who's just giving a bunch of speeches, but is actually modeling something and showing some sort of an alternative way things can be. Because otherwise the kids are just going to gravitate to your, like in the case of the kids that I was teaching, just rap stars, gangsters, or just sports celebrity. And that's pretty much all they had, because those were the only role models they ever saw. So no, in that sense, if I'm understanding what you're saying, I strongly agree. I think that's the only way. Like, we can't shove education into those kids, but it has to start with some sort of role model. And I think that would require community building, like encouraging communities, some sort of help from outside that could maybe bring about those ideas as to what needs to be done at the community level. It will have to come from within, but somebody has to, like, if we could all help, like, in some way of giving those ideas, I think I would agree, if that's what, I don't know what you're saying.
Yeah.
I think let me maybe give you a brief idea of where it starts for me. Around 2014, or actually 2013, 2012, I was doing radio interviews about motoring on a regional radio station in where I'm staying. So I would talk about cars and how to fix them and all of that, because yeah, that's what I do for a living. I fix cars. So I was introduced to a project called Bloodhound Supersonic Car. I think you may have heard of it. There was an attempt by a group from Britain to break the existing land speed record. So I was requested to speak about the car on radio. I just read a newspaper clip the first time around. I spoke about it, but later on in the evening, I went to their website and learned more about it. I then applied to become an ambassador, and that was accepted. So I became an education ambassador for the project, which meant going to schools to do talks about trying to get learners interested in STEM subjects. So I did a bit of traveling around South Africa. I went to many schools, we did school halls, we did a lot of things. But even after that, I would still go to schools trying and entice kids into STEM subjects. But I could see something emerging, like a pattern, where much as I'm trying to share information about maths and physics, which are exciting things, I'm not getting through to these kids. I come from a terrible background myself. Well, not that terrible compared to other people, but I didn't have it good. So having read emotional intelligence, having read social intelligence, I started seeing through the kids signs that they need more emotional help than help with maths and physics in terms of extra classes and whatnot. Because I did sometimes try extra classes, so you then get the idea that the kids can actually cope. Well, I did my maths and physics without assistance. They are actually just as smart, but they just have personal challenges that make it harder for them to even focus on maths and physics. So I started pulling back a bit in terms of pushing them into maths and physics or even teaching them in extra classes. I started looking at how can I actually help them feel better so that they can learn better. So if I can make them feel better, I don't even need to help them with maths or physics. So through reading and reading and reading, I start to get the vocabulary with which I can communicate even to them how to think about their problems. Because if you have a problem, but you don't have the language for that problem, you are very far from a solution. I think to even draft a mathematical equation, you need to even know what maths is. So Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman gave me the vocabulary with which I can think through my problems. So that's one of the things that I'm trying to share with people. Having studied a bit of engineering, I think the engineering gives a good framework within which things can be more orderly served on masses of people. So I've not really figured this thing out properly. I'm in the beginning stages. I'm very much confused, but I'm very much eager to make a difference. I've run a car repair company or a shop for over 10 years. I've just closed it last year, actually early this year, because, well, there's nothing challenging for me there anymore. You call me and say your car is stuck, I'll ask you a few questions. I'll probably give you a solution over the phone. It's not exciting for me anymore. But in the past few months or years, I've been able to solve problems that people have, and I'm not a medical doctor. I'll give you an example. I have a friend who has been married for over 5 years or 6 years. He and his wife didn't have kids, and they've been going to doctors and doctors and doctors. Maybe I came about their solution by coincidence. Fine. I asked him some few questions, and he said, okay, fine. When my wife is pregnant and she goes home, which is to another country, she loses the baby. I said, okay, fine. Tell her to stop going home. It was a simple thing. Like, there was no medical background. I just looked at the occurrences. What happens after this? So I just suggested to him, tell her not to go home when she's pregnant. And she did it. As we speak, they have their second child now, who is almost 2 years. Now, I don't think that's a medical solution, but I tend to frame a lot of things from an engineering perspective. Oh, okay. Another thing I studied engineering is reliability-centered maintenance. When something breaks, you need to find out how it broke. So when my friend said to me, when she's pregnant and she goes home, she comes back and she loses the baby. Okay, fine. So through the thinking of maintenance principles, engineering maintenance principles, I think I came up with a solution, and I think it worked. So I called their child my child. Maybe I'm giving myself too much credit, but I want to think that how I formulated that solution was through a maintenance process, an engineering maintenance process. So maybe that's where I am with this whole peace engineering thing, And I called that friend because he's actually an electrical engineer. I think he's doing his PhD now in electrical engineering. I called him last year and I said, do you think peace can be engineered? He said no, very quickly. So I think what I'm trying to introduce here, it's going to take time before I can actually present it in a clear way, or in a very interesting way, for that matter. But yeah, I'm doing the groundwork. I'm trying to figure it out.
Harry?
I think
Yeah.
Yeah. So okay. First of all, I admire your optimism and your enthusiasm. I've got so many things to say. I think it's better if I don't say anything. And if I offer, I'm going to put I'm sending out a link for a personal Zoom link, which other people are welcome to join after this meeting is over, or to some other time. But that includes other people who contributed to this idea, because I think that there's quite a lot to be teased out, and I think probably better to take it offline. That's my personal feeling about this discussion now. I've got so many things to say, I don't know where to start and where to stop. So I think it's safer for me to feel that I'm making a positive contribution if we do it that way. Is that okay, Temba? Does that make sense to you?
It does.
Okay.
I think I must let you know that it's way past my bedtime. It's
yeah, but we can do it I've got your email. I'll put my email in there as well. So you're obviously welcome to contact me. So we can arrange a time. So anyway, we've got all the information we need. I'll bow out of this discussion now, if that's okay. And we'll
Harry, can you just wait till another 12 minutes, and now we have done 12 hours, and then we can say we did it again. And there is someone who just joined, so I'll let him in.
Didn't mean to leave the meeting. It's just I didn't.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Out of this discussion, because I feel that I'm first of all I'm likely to hog it, and secondly, I think it's getting quite sort of tricky and complicated for me anyway to deal with it. So.
All right. Very interesting, Harry. What I was going to say was maybe something similar to what you were going to say. Is actually we could like meet again with several of us to talk a bit more about it, and maybe we could arrange that we meet every month, whoever is interested, or every 2 months, whatever the schedule like allows us, and that we continue in this way, because I hear you very loud and clear, and especially given what Sadia said, and actually what Harry said earlier, and actually the story is simple. So this in the 17th century, like I maybe said that earlier, Thomas Hobbes came up with the idea to say, we just have invented the mechanical calculator, and they're like things that turn around. And so let's say that the human mind also works like a calculator. And of course there was resistance, but then everyone said, yeah, mental operations, it's like with numbers, and you always want more. And so it's literally, we're still thinking like a 17th century intellectual, that we think it's all in numbers that we communicate, and more is better. And that is totally a sterile way of thinking, because before you can calculate anything, you need to decide what it is you're calculating. So there is this whole area below it that has nothing to do with calculation, and that is all about making distinctions. And what I heard you say, that we start with the self, and then we develop a relation with another, and then a third. Actually, I maybe would say that's one of those outcomes of thinking like a calculator, because in reality, we're always born in a relation. And so we come in the world, and there are already 4 or 5 people around us. So we never are really alone. And it is that calculator or the machine metaphor that makes us think we're individuals. But in reality, we're relations. We have a network of relations. And so I think we have an opportunity now to further develop what you just brought out. And for instance, emotional. The calculator has nothing to say about emotion. So all these people who over-identify, they can't talk with us because they don't have words. You said they don't have a lexicon because it doesn't exist. The emotion of a machine is not our emotion. They call it a random emotion. I don't know what they call it, but it's definitely not a human emotion. So I see what your challenges will be, that there are two narratives in society now, like the Golem, Daniel Goleman, I think. There's one that really says we start with emotions. And my friend here, who unfortunately cannot come to the camera, so he specializes in addiction. So I totally get what you mean. We're all emotional beings, and we occasionally calculate. And the problem is the university says the other way. They say, no, we're all calculators, and we sometimes have an emotional experience. And so that is our challenge, but it can also be our opportunity, is to kind of go back to the real narrative about being human. And so perhaps we can do that by kind of meeting again and continuing the conversation, and then be more clear about the small problems that we can tackle as we move forward. And so
can I have
yes.
I want to make a slight, yes, I saw you winding up on that, because I just wanted to comment on it. I saw Temba raised a book called Nudge, and I should say that as far as I know, this idea has become very popular now and updated and much improved, whatever the improved means here. And in Britain, it's become a darling, an idea for the people on what I would call the far right of British politics, and has quite a sinister feel to it, where people are being nudged to do things that the government wants, so that they don't even know they're being nudged. And as I find that one of the most, it's another way of manipulating people. And I'm somebody who believes both in personal and political relationships, that manipulating people without them being fully in agreement with it is one of the greatest evils that we can see what happened in Nazi Germany, for example. And I'm beginning to see small signs of it in Britain today. So as soon as I saw that word nudge, a shiver went down my spine. And I encourage you to think twice about going too far down that road. It's a bit megalomaniacal, and that's certainly how it's being used in British politics in the last 5-10 years. Anyway, enough of that. I'll try and address your other.
Yeah, so Tembe, would that be okay if I share your email address with several other people? But yes, because I'm going to do kind of a little bit an open-ended sharing, or I may just put it somewhere on the website, if that is all right, of our Karl Popper, and I can take it down any moment you want to. But because we're going to get to the end, and I maybe should like make a confession, or I don't know how to say this, but dus Elise is not with us anymore, but because she hadn't slept the whole night, and Rafe is back. He got up, he slept through the meeting, through the entire meet and greet, and now he's back. But the thing is, we're all volunteers, and so one part of my brain wants to do this to perfection, and so then the video will be up tomorrow, and you all get your emails and your feedback questionnaires, and everything is updated instantaneously. But the reality is that it is very messy, and so I have a very messy life. So I will try to send you all the emails, but it may take a year. But either way, in your case, I will put it immediately out there. But I just want to let everyone know this is like a labor of love, and we try to make the best of it, but we really can use the help, or in the smallest way, of everyone and anyone. And if you contact me, if you want to do something, contact Rafe or look of me. We try to contact you, but it is like we're juggling balls. And if I may, that is Kant, Immanuel Kant. They say that he was obsessed with purity and perfection. And that's another thing from that calculator metaphor, that we all want to be on top and go for something impossible, while the reality is very messy, and the messiness can be very enjoyable. if we kind of do it in the if we find a good lexicon, as you said, that we can communicate, and I'll give it now to Harry.
Just a brief request. I've realized that several people, including myself, I've put my email in the chat. That's something that I don't have any control over. I think I would be grateful if that, and I would suggest that Temba also, that this not be something that's put in a very public place. Ditto the WhatsApp, that I can control the Zoom access, but I can't control email access. So I'd suggest that all personal contact information be removed. I'm sorry, it's extra work for you, but from the chats. I don't know if other people agree.
That is very easy to do. It just means everything is going a little slower,
Yes.
because I will first remove it. But Temba, so it is okay if I share your email on some notes that summarize this web page. Sorry, that summarize the meet and greet, that we are trying to continue the conversation in a transcontinental way. And may I give your email address as like a contact person for people who want to learn more about this? And then I leave all the other email addresses more private, and I will send out a mass email, or not a mass email, just we also, if I may say, we have a mailing list, a Google mailing list, but I will explain that also in a separate email conversation. So we're kind of trying things out, whatever people are comfortable with, to stay in touch and to do something moving forward. So Rafe, we are now getting to the last minutes of the meet and greet.
Could I make
we have
one
done it.
recommendation? I've had my hand up for about 10 minutes here.
Sorry, I didn't see it. Please go ahead. Please go
Yeah,
ahead.
I can make it quickly. With this group, if you haven't read the classic, I read it twice, 10 years apart and about 30 years ago. Abraham Maslow,
Yes.
a hierarchy of
Needs.
it's hierarchy of needs. It's a theory of motivation. It's very relevant. It's the primary original resource on this. It says what people are saying. You need to, you can't teach hungry kids. Okay. I mean, it's a whole book on this kind of thing and all the research behind it. So I really recommend reading that if you're going to go forward with your discussion, because otherwise you're missing a big piece of the history of this kind of thinking. The other thing, though, is not to get simplistic. I taught physics and math. I also had, lots of work in engineering and did engineering work, and geology. The ways of thinking there are very, very important. And I really value it. I really try to get my students to value it. And even though we need to be sure everyone's fed, some of us can only do certain things. We can't do everything. And so I don't want any dismissive remarks about how you can't teach people math and science until everybody's fed. No, you better see the ones like the nice teacher who talk, the ones you're teaching are fed. But we need to value that. And that's one reason I told you I got into Popper, because I was taking history and philosophy of science. And we need to have that going on at the same time as these humanitarian efforts. And Maslow's makes that very clear. His hierarchy starts with physiological needs like food, safety needs like emotions, goes up to self-actualization. We can't wait on self-actualization. That's part of the problem in our society, is enough people haven't been able to have the opportunities, the instruction to self-actualize. And that's one reason people fight each other, because they have enough, they haven't solved their own needs. And one of those is the ability to think and the ability to, interact well. And I really believe that, math, science, engineering, all those subjects are really critical to be taught. Thank you.
All right. So if there is no one else that I missed, Rafe, may I give you the honors of closing our 12-hour meet and greet? Tambe, sorry, Tambe, maybe do you have some final comments, and then I'll give the word to Rafe. Tambe?
Hang on,
Temba,
hang on. I've got another Zoom at 7,
Okay.
so I'm going to have to make my final comments very brief. And I've just put them up in the chat. Basically, thanks to everyone for turning up.
All right. So
I'll
we,
see you in January.
yes, we will do a next one the second weekend of January. The idea is to do it every year the second weekend of January. And then, Temba, may I give you the honors of the final words?
Thank you so much for the invite. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to all of you. I don't come to this group to hear ideas like mine, but I do come to listen to ideas that are often very different. And I get that, and I very much appreciate new ideas that are directed at me. I'm still a learner in this process. Like I say, unlike you, I've not studied philosophy at university, but I appreciate that you still tolerate people like me in the group, and I hope to learn more from you as time goes. Thank you so much.
Oh, all right, maybe Luc, the allerlast.
Yeah, I'm so tired that I can't say a lot. So thank you all, and see you next time. I'm really too tired now to say anything serious. Okay.
All right.
Good night to you
Bye-bye.
both.
All right,
Good
goodbye, everybody.
afternoon, good morning,
Goodbye.
good night.
Mhm.
Francis, Hillel,
Good
Robin,
night.
Bye.
Tom, Patsy.
Thank you very much.
Auf
It was
Wiedersehen.
wonderful. Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Yeah,
Okay, bye.
Hillel, Sayed, Sadia, auf Wiedersehen.
Ja, auf Wiedersehen.
Good heaven.
Oh.
Harry, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Patsy Ann, very nice chatting.
Yes, yes. And I put up, I just realized I missed one word. I did it out of memory. The book is if you put it in an email, it's a theory of human motivation. I wrote in the chat, it was a theory of motivation, but you can check it online. But I think if you're sending out information, I just feel some of that discussion was lacking a basis, and really Abraham Maslow's book is the basis, to start with. So but it's in the chat. Thank you for all you did. Nice to see you face again.
And Patsy, thank you for what you said, because the thing is so a very heterogeneous audience, and that has certain challenges are also opportunities. And so I try to look at it in that way. And I was listening to what you said about sending out the emails, and I will try to do that, but unfortunately we don't have the perfect software to figure out who was present, and so send the email out to all the right people, but eventually we will send something out. But right now there's just this ourkarlpopper.net as some sort of a contact point, and then we'll just hope that things take care of themselves in terms of people finding each other when they.
Helen?
Yeah.
If you send out that to that smaller group, I will re-put in a note about my recommendation that people read Abraham Maslow's book.
I would love that. you know my email address. I mean, at least for all this information.
Yeah,
there's
right, because I
one,
got the one about today, but in fact, I can even reply to you. I'll do that right before I get on to other things. I'll reply with the whole citation of that book, because it just sometimes, it's my academic background, but it bothers me when people are talking about things and sort of reinventing things without building. And that's why I like Popper's. We build on Popper's ideas. We understand the history of science. And the same thing with education, this is sort of an education, I don't know what, a psychology book. The point is, we should build on what really important people and thoughtful people have done, and then go from there. We should not start over. And I felt that discussion was just kind of starting over, like we need to feed everybody. I know that that's simplistic, and it was a little better than that, but it seems to me the value of this group has been, that people would cite books, and they would, talk about who they'd talk to, and it was like a building of the discussion, rather than just like these random things. So that's why I'm kind of decided, well, one book I've read twice that I think people should read, I'm going to put it in there. It's not a Popper book, but if we're going to talk about how to influence people, and like you were saying, people's emotions and whatever, it's all in that book. It's the old classic. And yeah, you can find more recent stuff like that emotional intelligence book you mentioned, but that's beyond the basics. And this is a very academic book. So anyway, I'll send you an email with it.
Yeah. So
Take care.
Patsy, I live, wait
And
a
it's
minute.
Patsy Ann. Remember one more time.
Sorry, yeah, Patsy Ann. So I live in Ithaca, New York. That's not too far from you, I guess. And we have a secondhand book sale every year, and I'm actually in charge of the psychology section. And I agree with you 100% that it was all said in the 60s. And why on earth are they not teaching it anymore? And actually, I'm doing a little study of the change in the textbooks in psychology, how they're all now becoming cognitive psychology. And it's all about input-output processing.
Sure.
And it's really a scandal. And something needs to be, there needs to be pushback, because the way universities are teaching, they're now teaching more with an attorney on a retainer in case the students get upset about something. And but there needs to be a discussion about how. But then there is also very good news. But the good news is coming from the social work area. I don't know how much you're networked with them, but they're totally going in the direction that you kind of mentioned. And I heard the word like trauma informed.
Yeah, I know about some about that.
Yeah. And they're doing the good stuff. But then there's this university where they're all pushing the computational theory of the mind. And so there is a disconnect. And I think it's coming to the surface in the way people are clashing a little bit, that they and out of it, go ahead.
Well, the psychology courses I had were all in education psychology, because I got certified to teach math and science at the math and physics at the high school level, and then I did at the university level. But anyway, so it's all education psychology. I'm not a psychologist by any means, but it started with Skinner. I'm old enough. I had those first books, and they were stupid. It was all Pavlov reasoning, and Pavlov stimulus response. And it was so, I mean, I knew at the time, as an, I was a student, but it was like, this is stupid. This is just one picture. And it was like, well, if you can't show it with these experiments, it's nothing, and blah, blah, blah. Okay. But then I went back later, and then it was more into, this motivation. In between, on my own, I read Maslow's book. Then I went back to get my doctorate, and I needed to read Maslow's book. That's why I read it twice. So I read about 1965 and about 1985. And, or 75. I read about 75 and 85. I said 10 years. Okay. But anyway, the point, and then Carl Rogers and some of those others. So they had broadened it, from Skinner. But I'm kind of glad I saw that Skinner stuff, because I understood it, because I already had a, degree in physics, and I understood experiments, but it doesn't work. The same way in psychology as in physics. Well, anyway, so yeah, we've been through several of these cycles, but just to give you some of my motivations, just like yours, I've already seen, and I haven't followed some of the more recent stuff that much, but we need to have the broader picture. And I liked Maslow's book. Like I said, it's a long book and I read it, the whole thing just on my own. It was between my master's and doctorate. And I just had heard about it. I wanted to read it. And it was helpful to get the big picture. And then when I needed to reread it, so I knew, all the details fresh for a doctoral program, I was glad to, because I got even more out of it. And so I just feel like it's a book. It gives you the big picture then, and you can, like I said, more recent things people can look for and share down the road. I'll let them do that. But I just think, even the fella from Africa, he's got to have some background. And I didn't want to say it publicly. This part isn't recorded, is it?
No. Well, either way, it is actually still recorded, but I delete it.
We'll delete this. Okay.
Well, actually, I'll turn it off. Yeah.
Okay. I will make a statement that I still like, but not some people don't. Okay. But one of the graduate courses I had in education had a very good professor. And he had a phrase I've always remembered. And he said, and he was disdaining comment, but he said he didn't approve of people pooling their ignorance. In other words, we had to cite primary sources and, that kind of stuff. And he really respected the fact that I already had a physics degree. I mean, it was a education course and social issues. So it was broader topics, but he understood we had to have facts even in that. It wasn't just to say, well, this is my opinion about this. And, he wouldn't allow that. We had to have, we had examples, we had to read legal documents, we had to use primary sources. But that pool your ignorance. And so sometimes when things start veering off, or people just saying, well, this is what I think, and somebody else says, this is what I think, that phrase comes to mind. And it turned out it did. So just so you know, my motivation is like, well, let's get a primary source in here. Let's talk about Maslow's app. Then you can say, well, I disagree, or